Good artists borrow, great artists steal. This quote has been in circulation for decades, and that's because it's 100% true. Now, the real goal is to take inspiration from work you enjoy and then make it your own. And if you're publishing your own work, you absolutely can't just rip someone off. But when it comes to your home games, there are no rules. And come on, how many times have you seen something cool on TV or in a book and went, I want that in my game right now? Well, that's how I felt with Arcane. So Arcane, a show based on the world of Runeterra from League of Legends, has recently blown up, and I actually can't believe how good it was. The characters, setting, different factions, and all that stuff was fantastic. But is it possible to translate the world of Arcane into Dungeons & Dragons? And better yet, how do you adapt someone's work while making it your own? Well, we're gonna find out in this new series of videos. And yes, this channel has yet another series of videos because let's be honest, at this point I just make videos about stuff that interests me. But in this series, we'll find out how to break down interesting worlds, how to adapt them in a way so you can easily toss them into your D&D games, and then how to truly make them your own. And so hello, my name is Matt, and welcome to my hidden nerdy side, and today we are making Arcane a D&D campaign. To avoid any possible confusion, despite me possibly pulling some deeper Runeterra lore in certain instances, for the most part, I'll only be using information from what's available to the average viewer of Arcane. Also, the very fact I need to mention and talk about certain settings, characters, and their interactions means some spoilers have to be included. Also, it will be easier to follow along if you've seen Arcane, so if you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor and go watch it. I highly recommend it, and don't worry, this video will be here when you're done. And with that, you've been warned. So first, whenever I create my own work or borrow from others, I find the best way to do so is to establish the core ideas of what I'm creating or adapting. When it comes to books being turned into TV shows, video games turned into movies, shows turned into video games, or whatever, when they fail, this failure can usually be attributed to the fact whoever was adapting it failed to identify what the core ideas of what they were adapting were, or were unable to differentiate between what the core ideas were and what was simply flavor. For example, despite the Lord of the Rings movies being quite different than the books, they still remain in the top 1% of book adaptations because the creators understood the core ideas and feeling of what they were adapting. On the other hand, when you look at the Hobbit movies, instead of trying to emulate the feeling and core ideas from its beloved source material, the creators instead tried to toss in core ideas from the Lord of the Rings trilogy while adding some Hobbit flavor to it, and overall, it ended up losing its identity and feeling. So now that I've said the phrase multiple times, how about we go over what a core idea actually is? Well, it's the main philosophy, theme, belief, archetype, or greater proposition that whatever you're creating is built around. This would then make flavor all the additional characteristics added to your core idea to help enhance it, add complexity, or even challenge what your core idea is. The plot points in a story, aspects of a world, or personality of a character will heavily be influenced by this core idea, and your world's intricacy really starts to bear fruit once all these core ideas start to collide. For example, you can have a merchant guild whose main function is to make as much money as possible. Then you can have a merchant who is overtly dedicated to sucking every cent out of his clients to satisfy his greed, while another merchant can believe in the honor of fair trade and simply joined to enjoy the benefits of being a part of a merchant guild, and uses it to achieve the highest heights only possible in a free market. And based on which merchant your players run into, they will have completely different opinions of your guild and its core idea. And if your party runs into both of them, well then their opinion of said guild and its core idea can become really interesting. But anyways, let's bring it back to Arcane. We are going to start with its setting, then move on to its key factions, characters, and then end up with some examples of storylines methods you can now create since we broke down all their core ideas. And to identify Arcane's core ideas, we have to look at all of the above and see what common elements come up multiple times. So Arcane is set in the world of Runeterra, which is a massive world with way too many settings to cover in a single video. But Arcane specifically takes place in Piltover, an area comprised of two city-states, known as the Topside and the Undercity, which is also known as the District of Zaun. Piltover is known as the City of Progress, a booming epicenter of trade and scientific research, where its topside is filled with plenty of well-off people who bask in its many technological and societal advancements, such as teleportation gates, tall stable architecture, and a prestigious Academy of Science, just to name a few. Whereas its Undercity is flooded with rats, criminals, drug-addicted citizens, and people working in factories, workshops, or doing side hustles for extra cash. Scientific experiments also occur here, but the experiments performed in the Undercity would, let's say, not be up to code, and the pollution from its industrial development leaves the very air highly toxic to those who aren't accustomed to it. And who tends to benefit from these businesses? Rich people in the topside. So when you boil it down, it becomes overtly apparent the core idea of our setting is to illustrate the struggle between classes. The topside represents the upper class, and the Undercity represents the lower class. Hell, even the very name of each city directly indicates their place in the social hierarchy, and the topside is quite literally above Zaun. Now, once you nail down this core idea, you can start to add your own flavor and make it your own. And for some dungeon masters, you may have already done so. I mean, how many times have you ever run a city where there is a rich side of town filled with beautiful architecture, nobles in silk clothing, and so on, while also having a slums where your party can deal with nefarious criminals in its dirty, filthy streets? Arcane has just taken it a step further by creating two completely separate areas. So all you need is one area that's rich, one area that's poor, and a reason why the two areas are strongly linked together. In Arcane's case, the link is the Undercity and the Topside are technically one united state, but we'll get into that a bit more later. Now, having a core idea is obviously important, or else I wouldn't be talking about it for the past 5 minutes. But remember, it's only the first building block. What makes a story feel unique and have its own identity is how you choose to express your core idea, i.e., the flavor. And I think the best illustration of that, other than the names and locations of both areas, like I mentioned earlier, is the embodiment of their scientific advancements. Piltover's topside has Hextech, and Zaun has Shimmer. And yes, I will 100% be putting mechanics for both on screen. Hextech, also known as an artificer's wet dream, is the process of harnessing magic through science. It's magic embodied in the form of refined gemstones or unrefined crystals, and can be used to create magical effects and power up technology to give the normal, everyday person access to mystical gifts. Just a few examples of its amazing applications are gates capable of teleporting massive ships, lasers that can cut through steel bars, and gloves that can smash rocks with ease that are definitely made for mining and would never be used for anything else. So Hextech is very comparable to the stable and incredible technological advancements we see today that might as well be magic. Hell, the Hex Core is basically an AI, and of course all of these are much more readily available to the upper class. But Shimmer, on the other hand, is an injected drug that boosts a person's speed, strength, and size for a limited period of time, although it's also shown to be used for medicinal purposes. However, despite its many benefits, Shimmer is highly addictive, so much so that there is an entire section of Zaun dedicated to housing Shimmer addicts. This sadly obviously parallels the temporary relief of opioids and narcotics that have ended up leading to multiple drug addiction epidemics, and alludes to the incredible physical, mental, and monetary strain they place on a person. Hextech and Shimmer are just two great examples to illustrate the differences between the people of Piltover and Zaun, while also illustrating its similarities. For the people who are in control of each substance, Jace and Silco end up with incredible power and influence. No matter where you are, if you got something people want, your word carries a lot of weight. But think about if you were going to implement a class struggle into your game. How would you do it? Well, simply think about what makes rich people different different from poor people and how that affects their mindset. You can have an NPC pay his way out of jail time while another NPC rots in jail for the same crime, showing a monetary privilege discrepancy. You could have one area in your city be completely illiterate while the other enjoys books and celebrates playwrights, showing an educational discrepancy. To flip the positive and negative, you could have people in the poor part of town be more down to earth and laid back, while the rich part is filled with people who have a very high and snooty opinion of themselves, showing a social discrepancy. The point is, now that you've nailed down the core idea of a struggle between classes, it's much easier to come up with ideas and flavor to fit your narrative. Now let's move on to factions. There are 5 major factions in Piltover, and they can be broken down into core ideas. In the top side, you have the Council and the Enforcers, who can simply be broken down into a government trying to maintain the status quo and the embodiment of law and order. While in the Undercity, there are 3 factions: the Last Drop, Silco's crew, and the Firelights. And looking at the actions of each group, they actually share the same core idea, which is what is best for Zaun. But each faction has its own flavor, which guides it down a different path. The Last Drop gang attempts to better Zaun by making peace with Piltover and creating a beneficial relationship for both of them. Silco's crew sees the only way to achieve the best possible outcome for Zaun is to make it its own independent sovereign city-state, and the Firelights fight for a better Zaun by essentially cleaning up its act by ousting the current power and focusing on progress. However, each faction's flavor becomes even more present when we look at their main characters. Now, we have a lot to go over, so I will be dumbing down each one quite a bit, or else this video will be 2 hours long, and I'll even leave some out for the sake of time. But remember, the point of today's video isn't so you can simply replicate Arcane, it's to show you how to pull inspiration from it, twist that inspiration, and create your own incredible story with your players. So not only should you not worry about your players' actions easily changing the characters and its story, you should expect it and be hoping for it. However, for Jace, Jinx, Vi, Echo, and Caitlyn, I got some stat blocks for you in the description below based on their Arcane characters, so grab them if you want. So in the Council, the representation of government, we have Jace, Heimerdinger, Mel Medarda, the council members, and we'll throw Victor in there as well, even though he's technically not a council member. Jace represents the core idea of science should be used to help society, not harm it. We see this multiple times when he converses with Victor and the other council members, but we also see it enhanced and challenged when his naivety allows him to think none of his inventions would be used for other purposes, when he eventually agrees to the mass production and licensing of Hextech, and when he ends up trying to use a weapon for good and sees the consequences of his actions. So to make Jace your own character, all you have to do is decide where in the spectrum of what counts as helping society and what counts as harming it your version of Jace falls. Heimerdinger represents the core idea of how fast is too fast when it comes to scientific evolution. Heimerdinger's stance is clearly to err on the side of caution, and we see this constantly when Heimerdinger tells Victor and Jace almost every time they're together that they need more time to test their Hextech inventions. But to make Heimerdinger your own character, you simply need to play with the idea of how fast is too fast. I mean, Heimerdinger thinks certain inventions need decades of testing because he lives for hundreds of years. But what if he was an Aarakocra, a race that usually never sees it past the age of 25 to 30? Well, he might have a much more expedient attitude. And this type of attitude is perfectly demonstrated by Victor, whose core idea is pretty close to Jace's, where he believes scientific innovations are for the good of the people. However, due to his shorter lifespan becoming even shorter due to his crippling illness, his flavor puts him more on the extreme side of the spectrum, because he and the people of Runeterra need advancements now. But if you wanted to make the idea of Victor feel like your own, I would just play with the reason why he needs these innovations right now. Maybe a loved one is sick instead of him. Maybe he's simply tired of no one doing anything and wants to step up. Maybe it's purely for the glory of it all. I mean, it's your call to make. Then we also have Mel, who represents the opportunist archetype, jumping on chances when they arise. This can be seen by her being the first to vouch for Hextech, using Jace to further her political prowess, and so on. But of course, her flavor challenges challenges her opportunistic personality when she starts to fall for Jace, and when she herself is challenged by her mother, showing she does have a heart that stops her from completely diving into each and every opportunity to further her status. And finally, the counselors themselves go after the core idea of the out-of-touch politician, and we can see them flavored in various different ways, but the majority of it leads to them being more so into politics for their own personal gain than that of the people, as we see with them voting for whatever policy they think will further their own interests. If you wanted to personalize your counselors more, you can either continue to play with the different flavor options that can manifest from the out-of-touch politician, such as being unaware of people's needs, being lazy, being a mouthpiece for corporate interest, and all that jazz. But I think the better route is to give each of your counselors a different core idea, because that's the best way to make a character stand out and feel different, as we can see with Mel Medarda. Next, we have the Enforcers, who, remember, represent law and order. However, our two Enforcers are in stark contrast to each other. Marcus, the Sheriff, represents the corruption of power and its costs. I mean, he sold out his own superior officer and then does Silco's bidding consistently throughout the show. But as we see multiple times, the flavor of his conscience and his daughter essentially being held hostage definitely softens the blow and makes him a much more sympathetic character. That being said, you can easily change up his flavor by removing those sympathetic qualities to make him much more of a true villain, or you can alter the reason for his corruption, like he believes an independent Zon is truly what's best for everyone. That and anything in between is a surefire way to make him more your own. And then there's Caitlin, who represents the idea of what should justice be. She disobeys orders to try and help others, puts herself in danger consistently, and even has the old classic detective photo collage she always works on to crack the case. And of course, her main flavoring is from her rich upbringing, making her more out of touch than she would like to be, and from her relationship with Vi, which helps challenge the idea of what justice in the current situation would actually be. But if you were to remove her rich parents, or remove her relationship with an Undercity resident, how would that change her outlook? Answer that, and you have an original character. So that tackles the main Piltover characters, but now let's tackle the Undercity. And as we mentioned earlier, each faction represents their own idea of what is best for Zon, and so the leaders of each faction are built around that idea. So this includes Vander, Silco, and Echo. Let's start with Vander. Vander is interesting because he's basically a character who has already gone through his character arc. He used to believe the same as Silco, which is what's best for Zon is independence, but after experiencing the bloody civil war between the Topside and the Undercity, Vander's character developed a new flavor, which is what's best for the people of Zon is the preservation of life, which is achieved through peace with Piltover. So if you wanted to change Vander up a bit to make him more unique to your world, you can either change the definition of what peace with Piltover looks like, or play with just how important is the preservation of life, because for Vander, it's what comes above all else. But that doesn't have to be the case with your version of Vander. Next, let's jump to our series' main villain, Silco. Despite going through the same experiences as Vander, instead of completely changing his ideology, he decided to double down, which I think perfectly depicts the main message I've been trying to communicate by showing the broad range of flavor options you can derive from a single core idea, since Vander and Silco are on completely opposite sides of the spectrum. This is also illustrated by how they do business. Vander sticks up for people and makes sure everybody gets their fair share, whereas Silco exploits others to make sure he is always in control and can get done what he wants to get done. However, what's also important to note is Silco's character arc ends up being similar to Vander's, but just happening much later, because eventually, Silco found a life worth preserving above all else, his pseudo-daughter, Jinx. We'll get to her in a minute, but before that, how can you personalize Silco? Well, every D&D campaign campaign needs a compelling villain, so I wouldn't tamper too much with his core idea. But what you could do is either change how he comes to the realization that preserving life is more important, or simply take that part out and restructure him as a more definitively evil person who only uses the Better for Zon ideology as propaganda to inspire the people. Because it is a D&D campaign after all, and players every now and then just want to know who the real bad guy is and take him down. And the last leader is Echo, who, as we mentioned, also represents one path to a better Zon. However, his organization is created as a direct response to Silco. Echo also aims for Zon's independence, but not so much on paper as in its practices. By advancing their own technology and trying to eradicate Shimmer from the Undercity, Zon can use its own power and a clear mind to chart its own course. But if you wanted to change up Echo to make him your own, I would simply ask yourself, how would your poor city chart its own course? What does a bright future look like for them? Make it relevant to your own world and you're good to go. And now we get to our two main characters, Vi and Jinx. Starting with Vi, after looking at her deeply, it becomes apparent her core idea can be described through one question. What is worth fighting for? We see this from the very beginning as she talks to Vander after doing a dangerous heist, and he explains not every fight can be won with her fists. We then see her fight multiple opponents, sometimes winning and sometimes horribly losing without really accomplishing much. And finally, of course, she fights to try and stop her sister from falling into darkness, to stop Powder from fully becoming Jinx. However, this is without realizing that Powder doesn't exist anymore, and in the end, we see she is left with the question, is the idea of Powder worth fighting for? Is it something she should spend any more time with? Currently, the answer is yes, but in Season 2, that could change. Of course, if you wanted to change up Vi for your campaign, you would then just need to place a different complex situation in front of Vi that begs the question, is insert noun or idea worth fighting for? And finally, we have Jinx, who has the most open-ended core idea, which poses the question, who am I? And it's dialed up to the max with Jinx, as is illustrated with her mental disorders, schizophrenic tendencies, and the two different personalities she possesses, Powder and Jinx. And as the show progresses, we see Powder is no more. Now, how Jinx is handled I think is fantastic, and it would be a shame to change her up. But having dual personalities and mental illnesses isn't the only way to show an identity crisis. All you need is to decide on a few potential personalities she could end up with, and then a few defining moments that shape who your version of Jinx will be. In Arcane, we see these moments are when she makes the monkey bomb that kills her friends and leads her to Silco, when she drowns Powder in the waters of Zon, and when Silco dies and she launches the ultimate weapon. But your moments could be whatever you want, and better yet, shaping your Jinx based on what your players do is even better. So now that we have the core ideas of our settings, factions, and characters, you can now decide how to use them to create your story. Obviously, you could look at our breakdown and take what you liked from it and simply add it to your game. But remember, this video isn't about just using what Arcane did. It's about taking what it did and making it your own. So look at our core ideas and how Arcane flavored them and ask yourself, how can I apply them to my campaign and add my own flavor? Let's run through just a few examples. Do you have a player who has a problem sibling, parent, child, or close friend? The character of Jinx can easily be adapted to fit that mold. For tons of problem people struggle with the question of who am I and what is my purpose? On the flip side, is one of your players themselves a problem child? Having a sibling, parent, kid, or best friend character like Vi could really help them unlock their roleplay potential. What about the factions? Creating quests built around having to choose between the Firelights and Silco could be really fascinating. The Firelights are obviously the good guys, but what could a character like Silco offer your players? Money? Power? Shimmer? Also, what underhanded tactics could a villain like Silco use to hinder your players? Well, Shimmer is highly addictive, so maybe he tries to get your players hooked so they have to rely on him as its only supplier. What about the enforcers. Very common player character tropes are the law-abiding citizen, ex-cop, private detective, and so on. All these tropes could be linked to your law enforcement group, and your players can rout out its corruption or take matters into their own hands. What about the council? Surely you have a governing body or two in your world that could be spiced up by adding out-of-touch politicians or an opportunist waiting to activate your next political plot. But what opportunities could they be after in your campaign? What about the inner debate over scientific innovation in your world, with characters like Jace and Victor against Heimerdinger? Maybe in your world there is a forbidden magic characters like these can fight over. And of course there is Hextech. I joked about artificers loving it earlier, but just give it a new name and it could be made into an entire magic item modification system your players can enjoy by buying and swapping out power-ups for their gear. This is only a taste of what's possible now that we've broken down Arcane's key elements and what has made it such a beloved series. Using its core ideas as a backbone, you now surely have a plethora of settings, factions, and character ideas you can use to develop a world that truly feels like your own creation. So, how would you make it your own creation? Let me know in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, click the notification bell, follow all my social medias, and join our community Discord, where tons of our members shared their awesome ideas every day. And hey, if you really liked it, try checking out my Patreon page as well, where you can support the channel directly while also receiving some awesome perks such as free copies of my original encounters and extra homebrew goodness. Thanks for watching and indulging my hidden nerdy side.